Chapter 1, Introductory. This committee was constituted by the Government of Tamil Nadu by GOMS number 1741, public, political, dated the 22nd September 1969. The government order is reproduced below. In pursuance of the announcement of the Chief Minister on the floor of the Legislative Assembly on the 19th of August 1969, the government hereby constitute a committee consisting of the following persons to examine the entire question regarding the relationship that should subsist between the centre and the states in a federal setup with reference to the provisions of the Constitution of India, and to suggest suitable amendments to the Constitution so as to secure to the states the utmost autonomy. 1. Dr. P.V. Rajamannar, Chairman. 2. Dr. A. Lakshmanaswamy Mudaliar, and 3. Thiru P. Chandra Reddy, members. Orders regarding the detailed terms of reference to the committee will be issued in due course. The terms of reference to the committee were announced in GOMS number 2836, public, political, dated the 15th of November 1969, which runs as follows. In the GO read above, constituting the committee to inquire into center-state relations, it was stated that orders regarding the detailed terms of reference to the committee would be issued in due course. As indicated in the GO, the committee has to consider the entire question regarding the relationship that should subsist between the centre and the states in a federal setup. The committee is requested to examine the existing provisions of the Constitution and to suggest the measures necessary for augmenting the resources of the state and for securing the utmost autonomy of the state in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, including the High Court, without prejudice to the integrity of the country as a whole. The committee issued a questionnaire with a view to obtaining the views of persons who are interested in and have made a study of the subject. The questionnaire is set out in Appendix 1. The questionnaire was widely circulated, and copies of the same were sent to retired judges of the Supreme Court, ex-chairmen of finance commissions, and eminent jurists and other leaders of public opinion and members of the state legislature and of parliament representing the state. See Appendix 2. Tamil translation of the questionnaire was also made available. 2. Having regard to the terms of reference, the committee took up the following topics for consideration with reference to the provisions of the Constitution, relevant factors, events, and circumstances bearing on those topics, keeping before it the main objective, namely, to secure for the states fullest extent of autonomy within the general framework of the Constitution without in any way impairing the integrity of the country. The federal system set up by the Constitution, the unitary trends in the Constitution and its working reasons for such trends, provisions of the Constitution affecting the state autonomy in administrative and executive fields, distribution of legislative powers contained in lists 1, 2, and 3, union, state, and concurrent, the seventh schedule to the Constitution, legislative powers conferred on Parliament, centre, inconsistent with state autonomy, division of taxing powers as between the Union and the states, distribution of revenues as provided in the Constitution, statutory grants from the centre to the states, discretionary grants from the centre to the states, finance commission, loans from the center to the states, indebtedness of the states to the center, central planning and planning commission, Supreme Court and High Courts, role of the governor, extent of and limitation on his powers, emergency provisions, Articles 356 and 357, Articles 352, 353, and 354, Article 360, public services, territorial integrity of states, representation of states in Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, language question, provisions relating to trade and commerce, intrastate and interstate, deployment of Central Reserve Police Force in states, elections, interstate water disputes, seabed, union executive, amendment of the Constitution. Besides the study of the provisions of the Constitution and decisions of courts bearing on them, the committee considered the replies received in response to the questionnaire, evidence given before them by eminent men and senior government officials, opinions expressed by jurists and statesmen in books and articles in the press and in journals, and the relevant provisions of other constitutions of the world likely to throw light on the questions arising on the reference to the committee. The committee has examined the several conflicts which have arisen and are likely to arise between the center and the states in several fields: administrative, executive, legislative, judicial, economic, etc., and has sought to arrive at conclusions regarding the relations that should subsist between the center and the states. In accordance with such conclusions, the committee has made recommendations, some of them involving amendments to certain provisions of the Constitution by way of deletion, addition, or alteration, others for evolving conventions, though not statutory, but which are of binding force, including laying down of guidelines to ensure harmonious relations between the center and the states, and to safeguard the autonomy of the states without jeopardizing national integrity. Though the problem of center state relations has acquired vital dimensions and new importance in recent times due to different political parties being in power at the center and in the states, there have, however, been demands for adequate safeguards necessary for ensuring proper and harmonious relations between the center and the states, inasmuch as the provisions of the Constitution governing center state relations were found inadequate for the purpose of meeting situations or resolving problems arising in this field. Soon after the Constitution began to work, there was a growing realization of the strong domination of the center, not only on general policies, but also in the spheres which exclusively belong to the states, and of the tendency on the part of the center to exercise control over states, drastically affecting the autonomy of the states. Strong feelings have been voiced against the attitude of the center in curtailing the powers of taxation enjoyed by the states before the introduction of the Constitution, and the manner in which the center has been interfering with the affairs of the states ever since. But these issues were prevented from flaring up into serious conflicts between the center and the state governments, because the center and the state governments were controlled by one and the same party. Eminent jurists and students of politics with no political bias have also adverted to this fact. Through Ashok Chandam, retired Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Chairman, Third Finance Commission, in his book Federalism in India, has observed, quote, one party government, both at the center and the states, have facilitated and even encouraged Parliament to consider itself as the apex of the legislative and executive pyramid. The Prime Minister and other ministers have not hesitated to take an indirect and sometimes even a direct hand in settling and deciding issues which are constitutionally the responsibility of the states. The limited sovereignty of the states is thus being surrendered by usage and sufferance, and it would be difficult for a state later to reassert or regain its constitutional authority. It may be claimed that the advice tendered by the Union ministers is in their capacity as members of the Congress High Command, and that there has thus been no infraction of the sovereignty of the states. This sophistry will hardly delude many. Unquote, page 132. The Mail, in its editorial dated the 23rd of April 1967, states, quote, but it is equally important to remember that the difficulties that may arise in the relations between center and states had cast their shadows even when the Congress party held sway over the whole country. Unquote. Thiru C.V.H. Rao, writing in the Hindu, dated the 26th of January 1967, under the caption Evolving Perspectives in Center State Relations, writes, quote, many of the state governments obviously consider that while the Constitution confers on them an autonomous status in a prescribed area of administrative and financial responsibility, this is being circumscribed in practice by the center assuming the initiative in the crucial spheres of finance and planning. In some measure, the states are also discontented about the restraints sought to be clamped on their initiative in what is purely their own responsibility, like maintenance of internal peace and law and order. There is next the problem of food policy and administration, in which the center's interference, unavoidable in the interests of the country as a whole, involves an erosion of the state's initiative. Some of these issues have, over the last few years, erupted into prominence with different degrees of acuteness, but were prevented from flaring into serious conflicts because the Union and all the state governments are manned by the Congress Party. With the probable change in the complexion of at least some of the state governments after the next election, the possibility of their assuming a more strident form cannot be ruled out. Unquote. Again, Thiru A.N. Sattanathan, in his article The Federal Process at Work, Parleying from Strength, published in the Mail, dated the 27th of September 1969, says, quote, the acceptance of the center's authority, even by Congress ministries, has not always been unquestioned. This pattern of settling center state relations at the Congress High Command level cannot possibly be extended to conditions now prevailing when non Congress ministries are in power in some of the states. It was well known that the previous Congress government in Madras hesitated to press to the hill some of their cases with the center if there was already a definite Congress or central government policy on the subject. Unquote. Thiru Amal Rai, in his book Intergovernmental Relations in India, has dealt with this point. He has this to say, quote, central control tends to create tension in relations between the center and the states. No widespread union state conflict has ensued. This situation can be attributed to uniparty role in both center and the states. The party resolutions which command the Congress governments in the states to pursue certain policies are practically those which have been passed by the working committee, and obviously they reflect the thinking of the central government. Hence, the norms for action by the Congress governments in the states are largely set by the working committee. The basic policies are evolved at the top of the party organization, which are pressed on to the state governments for elaboration and implementation. Unquote. Pages 127 and 128. After analyzing the centralizing forces in operation in Indian federalism, he goes on to say, quote, we have analyzed the centralizing forces in operation in Indian federalism, but these are challenged, although not continuously but intermittently, by certain decentralizing forces which guarantee substantial state autonomy and put a brake to the process of total integration which has been set in motion in India by the powerful triple, that is, national plan, massive grants, and party. One such decentralizing force is what K.C. Ware calls the self consciousness and self assertiveness of the regional governments, which is slowly but perceptibly increasing in India. It's true that owing to strong party pressure, this awareness of autonomous status and existence remains frequently dormant and cannot become as articulate and vocal as that of Western Australia or Quebec. Unquote. Page 129. The proceedings of the Madras legislature before the election in 1967 contain speeches in which honourable members have pointed out the unsatisfactory nature of centre state relations and protested against the dominating role of the centre and the interference by the centre even in exclusive state fields. Refer Appendix 3, setting out extracts from speeches made by Dr. A. L. Mudaliar and Dr. V. K. John and others. It will, therefore, be seen that the demand for more and fuller powers to the state and the need for amending the Constitution to the extent necessary is not a new phenomenon arising out of the change in the political complexion of the Tamilnadu government. The question had been simmering almost ever since the Constitution was on the anvil, and it was left to the late Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Dr. C.N. Annadurai, to give it rather an official touch at the ministerial level soon after he assumed office as Chief Minister. While answering the questions at the Press Club of India in New Delhi on the 8th of April 1967, he emphasized the need for the setting up of a high powered commission to examine the working of the Constitution for any necessary reallocation of powers between the centre and the states. He said that under the present Constitution, powers which strictly came under the state's sphere were being slowly taken over by the centre, and pointed out that an ideal centre was one which left sufficient powers to the states and kept just enough power to itself to protect the integrity and sovereignty of the country. Excerpts from the speech made by him On the 27th of June 1967, in reply to the general discussion on the revised budget for 1967 and 68 in the Madras Legislative Council are reproduced below. Quote, I would ask the honourable members of the House to bear in mind that there are three kinds of financial relationship of the state to the centre. One is through the allocation of the taxes that they collect here, the second is the grant, and the third is the plan fund allocation. If you deeply analyze the figures from 1950 to 1967, you'll find that as the days roll on and on, the first two items are losing their importance, and the third item, namely the plan allotment, is gaining much ground or gaining much dominance. That does not come under the purview of the Finance Commission. The centre has got a whip in its hands in the nature of grants because the grants are given by the centre at its discretion. The plan allocation is left entirely, if you will permit me, I'll say entirely, to the whims and fancies of those who call themselves members of the planning body. If a large amount of money which is needed for the reconstruction of a country is to be left to the whims and fancies of another body, which does not come under the control of any authoritative body, then I think there is every urgent necessity for a reallocation of all these things, and the financial relationship, as far as the plan amount is concerned, is to be reviewed and reviewed urgently, so that we may not be, I do not know what other word I can use, uppermost in my mind, only this word comes, though it may be awkward, and we should not be robbed of what is due. The relationship between the state and the centre should be reviewed. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister of India has brushed aside that suggestion in one of the replies she has given on the floor of the Parliament. She has stated that no commission is necessary. If by this the Prime Minister means that she is posted with all facts and would render justice, I welcome that statement. But if the Prime Minister were to mean that there is no necessity for a commission because there is no necessity for reviewing the position, then I beg to differ from the Prime Minister of India, and I would reiterate from this House that the time has come and come urgently too, and with emphasis. None can minimize that the time has now come when the state-center relationship should be reorganized on a more stable basis. Unquote. Earlier, on the 17th of June 1967, presenting the budget to the legislature, he observed inter alia, quote, there has been considerable change in the matrix of center-state financial relations since the provisions of the Constitution in this regard were settled. There have been a number of new trends and developments which could not have been visualized when the Indian Constitution was framed. The Constitution had already provided for considerable concentration of powers in the hands of the central government through a new institution which was beyond the ken of the architects of the Constitution. The centre has acquired still larger powers, causing concern about the position of the states. This new development relates to economic planning. The powers which the central government have assumed in regard to mobilization, allocation, and pattern of utilization of resources for the plan have reduced the states to the status of supplicants for aid from centre. Though some may shrink from discussing this issue on account of party discipline, all those who have looked at this problem from the purely economic angle have expressed regret at these trends in financial relations between centre and state. Many chiefs of state governments have recognized that state governments cannot discharge their responsibilities in meeting the growing aspirations of the people for a new way of life unless the resource base of the states is considerably strengthened by giving them access to growing sources of revenue and by allocating the planned resources on an agreed basis, leaving the states with complete freedom to utilize them according to their judgment. The House is aware that these leaders have also, like me, referred to the need for rethinking on the relations between the center and the states. I have no doubt that everyone will agree on the need for placing these relations on a satisfactory basis. No one can deny that the experience so far in regard to distribution of revenues, delimitation of powers, and allocation of assistance for planning has been such as to cause bitterness. It has become an urgent necessity to eliminate this bitterness and evolve ways and means of promoting fruitful relations between center and states. The problem I have posed need cause no apprehension or misgiving, but should only provoke thought. It's my earnest desire that through mutual goodwill and understanding, we should forge a fraternal and beneficial nexus. Unquote. As recently as November 1970, the Chief Minister of Mysore, Thiru Virendra Patil, has deplored the general deterioration in center state relations and has gone even to the extent of giving a warning that a day might come when different houses and bhavans of states in New Delhi are constrained to assume the character of embassies. He has stated that it is a stark reality that the problem of center state relations is already assuming serious proportions. Reference: The Mail, dated the 29th of November 1970.